Hello there, my name is Steve Yapoyan, student ID S19159521, and you are watching my C++ 2D shooting game video presentation. The task at hand is to develop a 2D shooting game using the C++ programming language. We also have to use the STL2 development library to implement graphics. Introducing my game, Giraffe Mayhem. During the process of making my game, I took reference from the resources provided to me on Moodle. There were test labs as well as tutorials for most of my things I needed for my game. Examples include collisions, implementing sounds, and shooting. For my testing methodology, I have only built my solutions in the code itself and did not manage to use other methods of testing. Now let's move on to the description bit of my program and describing how it all works. Let's start off with the shooting mechanic. I managed to add a shooting mechanic to my game where when the player clicks with the left mouse button, a bullet is fired from the player avatar. In my code, in the gameloop.cpp, in this section here, I used an if statement which checks for the mouse input. If that input button has been detected, not only will it shoot but also play the sound effect as well. In the bulletmanager.cpp, it checks for a countdown timer so the bullets spawn at a set interval. If the interval is met, then the bullets will spawn on the player's location and will travel where the mouse button is clicked. Moving on, we have collisions. The only collisions I have are for my player, enemy, and bullets. In the bulletmanager.cpp, when the bullets.rect is spawned and overlaps with the enemy's rectangles, a collision occurs and the enemy is deleted and the bullet despawns. This also applies when the player collides with the enemy, which can be seen in the enemycontroller.cpp. The map you see before you is called Tilemaps. The tilemap is created through a single picture divided into small segments that are stored into a vector. Then, they are rendered in the render function. Here is an example of how I divided them into segments in Photoshop and numbered them. And in the tilemap.h, you can see how I laid it out and edited them to my liking. For user interfaces, I have implemented a lives counter containing 10 lives, a score, and a timer counting upwards. Here is how I did my scoring UI. When the player shoots a bullet and hits an enemy, the score goes up by 1 in the enemycontroller.cpp and is displayed in gameloop.cpp. In the gameloop.cpp, in the render function, there is a timer that counts out like a digital clock. The lives UI is a non-text UI that is reduced when the enemy collides with the player. Instead of having digits going down, I made a health bar in Paint where it shrinks in width when the player loses a life. If the life reaches 0, the game is over. As for the code profiling and performance optimization, I clicked on Debug and then Profile Performance, and from there did profiling for both CPU and memory usage. From the CPU usage, we can identify that the game loop render uses the most CPU after the main function. As for the memory usage, the game runs at a relatively low memory usage, and the max it has ever gone was around 240 megabytes, and that is because of the multiple audio files used during gameplay. Onwards, we move to my favorite bit, which are the sound and audio. The sound effect used for the shooting is made by my own mouth. The background music was a remixed version of a song called Super Idol, made by a friend. The shooting sound effect is made in soundplayer.cpp. Below, in the play sound function, there is an if statement that plays both my audio files when conditions are met in the other files. Now, I will be talking about an advanced feature that I managed to code in, which is the game over screen. Once the player runs out of lives, the game over screen is displayed showing the player's final score. There are a couple of features that I was unable to add and would like to implement these in the near future to make my game even greater. They are as follows: a main menu screen with a play, volume, and exit button, a loading screen, a pause option in-game, animation for both players and enemies, collisions with tile maps within the game, particles for when the player and enemies die, and finally path finding for my enemies. Now, I will be giving a short demonstration of pure gameplay of my game. Enjoy. So, during that gameplay we can identify a whole bunch of features. We start off by spawning in the middle of the map, and immediately the timer starts counting up and enemies spawn. The player is able to move freely in all directions using the WASD keys, and can shoot in set intervals. Enemies die in one hit. I have made my game interesting and more engaging by making it so that there are different rounds. Round 1 is nice, calm and simple, but once the player kills 30 enemies, 30 spawn, and round 2 begins. There are a total of 5 rounds, and in order to move on to the next, players must eliminate twice as many as the previous amount. That is the condition I have set for my game. Furthermore, every round rewards the player with 15 more enemies spawning. Once the player loses its final life, the game is over and the final score will be displayed in the game over screen. Before we end off the presentation, all additional resources used to make the game has been referenced in the read.me file in github.com. Thank you for watching. If there are any questions or feedback, feel free to ask them in the comments section below, and I will be sure to respond to them in due time.